all set to go.
All right, thanks, Jessica. So I'm
Welcome.
going to pop my slides in the chat for anyone who would like to follow along. And I also have some links at the end of the presentation that will be useful. And then I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining this morning. My name is Emily Bovier. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Psychological Sciences. And I'm going to talk to you today about a project that I've been working on that is getting firsthand perspectives from our students at SUNY Oswego who identify as neurodiverse. So in terms of the main objectives of this session, the plan is to review our students' perspectives of their own strengths and challenges. And then I have some resources at the end to help us align that student input with best practices in both universal design for learning and digital accessibility so that we as a campus community can continue to support our students. So just as a little bit of a background for folks that might not be as familiar with the term neurodiversity, this is referring to natural variation in human brains that yields differences in both cognitive and perceptual processes. So some common examples include autism spectrum disorders, attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, but the umbrella for neurodiversity has continued to broaden and can include things like anxiety and mood disorders. And we have students who have learning differences and intellectual disabilities can also fall under the umbrella of neurodiversity. So in terms of the goal of my overall work and this project in particular is to adopt a strength-based model to set students up for success. So what we can do is we can focus on assets of their individual differences to promote more of that strength-based approach. So for this project that I worked on, I had 70 students who participated, and these students self-identified as neurodiverse. So they did not need to have a formal diagnosis. Those students primarily identified as having ADHD and autism spectrum disorders. And so participants completed Darling's Disability Identity and Opportunity Scale for us to get some quantitative data from those students. And what I was primarily interested in is the concepts of disability pride or exclusion and dissatisfaction, which are subscales that you can get from this particular Disability Identity and Opportunity Scale. And so essentially, the language was changed so that instead of the term disability, it was neurodivergence. And so some sample questions from the disability pride subscale are, I'm a better person because of my neurodivergence, or my neurodivergence is an important part of who I am. Items that loaded onto exclusion and dissatisfaction included things like my neurodivergence limits my social life or keeps me from working, or I'm often excluded because of my neurodivergence. So in addition to getting quantitative data where students rated the degree to which they identified with those statements, participants also provided just open-ended descriptions of their own strengths and challenges, both in the classroom and in or outside of the classroom as well, because we know that success in college is not contingent simply on performance in academics. It includes things like interpersonal relationships, the ability to live independently. There's a lot of different factors that can load into what success might mean in college. So when I looked at the open-ended responses from our students, two common themes emerged across both strengths and challenges with regard to academics and social life. So motivation emerged as a theme with regard to academics, and communication emerged as a theme with regard to their social life. And so what I opted to do was compare these themes across differences in disability identity. So specifically looking at disability pride, again, because I'm focusing on like that strengths-based approach. So in terms of motivation, here are some of the general findings. In terms of academic strengths, we had for participants who scored low on disability pride, 18% of that sample endorsed motivation as an academic strength, compared to those with high disability pride had endorsed motivation as a strength 26% of the time. So what we're seeing here is that the disability pride status is driving these differences in what students endorse as strengths or challenges. So even though the descriptive information that I have on the slides here is numerically different, these disparities did not reach statistical significance, but it still helps give us a starting point to understand the experiences of our neurodivergent students. In terms of motivation as an academic challenge, we see that those with low disability pride tend to endorse motivation as a challenge more so than students who have high disability pride. In terms of communication, again, that was another common theme that emerged within the social domain. So in terms of communication as a strength, we see that students who fall into our high disability pride category endorse communication as a strength more so than those who are in low disability pride. And in terms of communication as a social challenge, universally, this seems to be a challenge for our neurodivergent students, but we do see that those in the low disability pride group endorsed it a little bit more than those in the high disability pride group. And again, we've got descriptive data that are different, but in terms of statistical significance, these differences did not reach statistical significance. But again, can still be informative for how we move forward to support our students. Just to share with you some additional challenges that emerged from the data from our students, focus and attention was probably the most endorsed challenge. So anytime a student made a notation about distraction, difficulty concentrating or staying on task, boredom or mind wandering, they were labeled as listing focus and attention as a challenge. And so about 60% of the sample endorsed this challenge. We see some other things like time management, comprehension, and procrastination popped up a lot in their open-ended responses of their experiences in the classroom primarily. So in terms of time management, this includes things like managing work outside of class. That tended to be the biggest piece of the narrative from our students. With regard to comprehension, the one thing that I want to emphasize here is that it's not comprehension in terms of an intellectual difference. It's more comprehension with regard to circumstantial barriers. So a lot of students had notations about if the instructions that they receive are vague, that might lead to challenges with comprehension, right? So I just wanted to make sure that that was distinguished from an intellectual difference that might lead to comprehension difficulties. And with procrastination, the one thing that I wanted to highlight with regard to this is that we have many of our students who struggle with procrastination, but with our neurodivergent students, the consequences of procrastination had to do with feeling overwhelmed or giving up. Okay, so again, that's why we really want to focus on a strength-based approach so that we can sort of mitigate these challenges that students are facing based on being overwhelmed. So I have some open-ended responses to share with you. So I have 3 students that I pulled their responses from. I'm going to share with you their challenges, and then when we get to the strengths, I will share these same 3 students, their narratives about their strengths. So student A says, I struggle to pay attention during instructional time and often occupy myself by doing stuff that is irrelevant to the class. I also procrastinate and leave assignments to the last minute. We have student B who says, knowing exactly what is expected of a certain course and being alert and involved in a lecture can be very difficult. And student C, this student had a very long narrative, so I picked out pieces that I found most helpful. So student C says, I burnt myself out trying to do everything perfectly. I juggled schoolwork, homework, housekeeping, and attempting to be healthy. A lot of my anxiety stems from not having such reasonable teachers in the past. I fear people losing patience with me and leaving me or giving up on me. So these narratives were very impactful to sort through. It just gave me a lot of different perspectives to hear from our students firsthand. So let's focus on the strengths. I highlighted communication and motivation as strengths that emerged as common themes, but let's focus on a few others that students identified. So in terms of their academic strengths, we have motivation, organization, and social support in terms of things that help students with their academics. And with social strengths, we talked about communication already, but we have attentiveness and empathy that students identify as their strengths with regard to their interpersonal relationships. And as far as what interpersonal relationships mean, I asked students about their interpersonal relationships, not only romantic relationships and friendships, but even the relationships that they have with their professors, right? So communication, attentiveness, and empathy emerged as some of the primary strengths that neurodivergent students identified for themselves. So here are those same three students, A, B, and C, and their comments on their strengths. So the strength for student A, the strength that helps me be successful is having a group that's close to me to push me to do well. I also am motivated by things that I find interesting. Classes that I enjoy make me more eager to work. So we see social dynamics, right? So having a close group to help push the student. And we see motivation and interesting and engagement as ways to promote that student's strengths. For student B, when I'm organized and fully understand what is expected of me, I can be very successful. So here we see that comprehension component, right? The ability to have clear, specific instructions so that the student can capitalize on their strength of being organized when they fully understand what's expected. So having a detailed planner or an online organization method. And so I'll share some resources at the end about how we can help promote this for students based on how we design our courses. For student C, I am dedicated, passionate, intelligent, capable of making connections and parallels between subjects that further illuminate the material, meticulous with a fine eye for detail, good at writing once I get going, and ambitious. So it's really important to focus on all of these wonderful characteristics that students have. And if we design our courses or any type of college-based experience with these strengths in mind, we can help lift up students who might otherwise have challenges because of the structures that are in place that are creating a disability versus something that's inherent about the student themselves. So in terms of some helpful resources for folks, I have linked out here information on universal design for learning. So these UDL strategies can assist with optimizing our perceptual and our cognitive processes. We have a few workshops that address universal design for learning for folks who are interested. And it basically gives us a context to design learning opportunities that allow for things like multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representing the information that we convey to students, and allowing students multiple means of action and expression so that we can capitalize on their strengths and don't inadvertently create systemic challenges for these students. In terms of digital accessibility, we have several workshops this afternoon that target digital accessibility. And if we create our content with digital accessibility in mind, it can help minimize challenges to our cognitive load. And so especially for students who identify as neurodivergent, it can help mitigate challenges with cognitive load. And as we say in the work group on accessibility practices, if we design content with accessibility in mind, we are making it accessible for everyone, right? So all of us have variations in our cognitive load from person to person, from context to situation. And so by utilizing these principles of universal design for learning and digital accessibility, we can help mitigate any of the challenges that folks face because of cognitive load. So I'll share out these slides again in case anybody popped into the session after we got started. But these two links here take you to the digital accessibility link, takes you to SUNY Oswego's website on digital accessibility, where it highlights the 5 basic principles of creating digitally accessible content. And in terms of universal design for learning, this will take you directly to the CAST website that breaks down multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression for creating learning experiences for our students. So I'm going to stop my share now, and we've got a couple minutes in case anyone has any questions. I'm happy to chat through any questions that folks may have, or just general comments that you have. Oh, Faith, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Emily, for this presentation. I have actually a couple of questions.
Sure.
I'm just going to say all of them and let you talk, but I'm curious as to what the cross-section of students, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, or just like upper level in terms of like the focus on gen ed classes versus classes within their major. And you didn't discuss this, but was there any discussion about alternative assessment as well in the realm of like students who just can't pass multiple choice exams, right?
Sure.
So those are my I'm curious about all those aspects of your research.
Sure. So in terms of the sample of students, these were all students who were enrolled in psychology classes. They were not necessarily psychology majors. And we had a pretty even distribution of freshmen, sophomore, junior, and senior students. So students signed up for this study and they were able to receive extra credit as part of their course. So it could come from anywhere from intro psychology students who are gen ed students or taking it as an elective for one of their majors, through other psychology elective courses where they could be psychology majors. So we had a pretty strong representation of our student population. I was interested in that as well to see, like, I wondered if maybe I'd have a lot more freshmen, but it wasn't even distribution across freshmen through seniors. And in terms of the your comment about different assessments, this is where universal design for learning can be an excellent tool for folks. And that is the concept of multiple means of expression, right? If we think about how we define learning in our classes, if a class is primarily a multiple choice exam format, that's not going to set a lot of students up for success, even independent of neurodivergent status. And so what universal design for learning emphasizes is essentially a student choice, right? Like if you have to think through your learning objective. What is the goal that you are trying to get students to achieve? If it's understanding foundational content, multiple choice might be one option, but you could consider having alternative options like a written paper, or a verbal exam with students if they're better able to articulate verbally their understanding. Now, there are some more advanced learning objectives in different fields, like writing and oral communication are important learning objectives for students to achieve. But by giving students choice and allowing multiple forms of assessment in classes, that agency sometimes can help eliminate even the stress that comes with engaging with a project like that, so that that eliminates a form of a barrier, right? Stress, anxiety, feeling overwhelmed, so that they can better target those the true learning objectives that you're trying to achieve with them. So those are excellent questions. So I highly recommend that folks look up. We have several workshops on universal design for learning. SUNY CPD does courses on universal design for learning. We have a faculty member in the Modern Languages Department who works with SUNY CPD and runs those sessions. So there are excellent opportunities just to get an idea of how we can be flexible with our course content and the tasks that we ask students to do to achieve the learning objectives that we're aiming for. Yeah, excellent. Does anyone else have any other questions? We're almost at time. Yes, go ahead. Sure.
My name is Nandakumar. I'm a professor in the math department.
Hi,
I teach
nice to meet you.
statistics.
Yes.
You mentioned about actually neurodivergence issues. What percent of the students have this problem? What is your sample size? And also you mentioned about statistical tests. What test did you use?
So the sample size, we had 70 students. And because I was working with qualitative data, so I did a chi-square analysis, and the chi-square analysis did not yield statistical significance between the groups with low disability pride versus high disability pride. So even though numerically, right, we look at it and we might see 35% versus 47% looks like an impactful difference, it did not reach statistical significance with a chi-squared analysis. So it's possible that with an increased sample size, we could parse out some individual differences in terms of disability pride status. It's also possible that there wasn't enough variability in disability pride status to begin with in order to parse out differences that we would see among our students based simply on their disability pride status. Good question. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you so much for joining. One more time, I'm going to just pop in my slides to the chat, and thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you so much.